Sax and Mary were dedicated to the education of their children. The three oldest, Ray, Walter, and Nellie, had all graduated from college. Chester was to become a farmer, and the family would help him get started. In 1915, the entire Fox family moved to Blue Earth, Minnesota. Located about 300 miles from their home in Peoria, Sax bought a large farm there. The property had 3 houses and was big enough to support his 3 sons and their families. Sax's oldest son, George, owned a large farm in Wilmot, 70 miles away. Also 70 miles away was Minneapolis, home of the University of Minnesota. Sax and Mary's youngest child, Grace, was planning to attend the university. At the age of 17, she had completed a year of college. She had gone as far as she could at Bradley Polytech. Just like Uncle Walter said years before, they had officially run out of older kids. But Grace was too young to live in Minneapolis by herself. The family planned for older sister Nellie to move to Minneapolis and get a teaching job. She would find a home within walking distance of the university. Once established, Grace would stay with Nellie while she went to school. But first, Nellie would help the family get started in Blue Earth. The Foxes were soon settled at their new family farm. Sax, Mary, and the girls stayed in the big house. Ray and Walter stayed in one of the little houses. Chester stayed in the other. Mary and the girls helped him clean his new little house and decorate. They were expecting an important guest. Chester was traveling back to Peoria to get married. His intended bride was 20-year-old Marjorie Barkley, his high school sweetheart. He returned to the old neighborhood. The couple was married in Marjorie's home on Fredonia Avenue. It was February 1916. The couple honeymooned in Chicago, then returned to their new home in Blue Earth, Minnesota. Marjorie would be a farmer's wife, but she was probably unprepared for Blue Earth. She had lived in Peoria all of her life. With 76,000 people, there were theaters, libraries, and concert halls. The population of Blue Earth City was 2,000. There was 1 grade school and 1 high school. In 1910, the entire county had only 16,000 people. There are slightly fewer today. The entire county has about 16 people per square mile. Polk County has 300. Sax and Mary wanted their new daughter-in-law to feel welcome at her new home. For a wedding gift, they bought her a new piano. Marjorie picked the one she wanted while she was in Chicago on her honeymoon. It was shipped by rail to Blue Earth. Walter and Ray picked it up at the freight depot. Marjorie, Mary, and Grace wanted the new piano to be in the big house. They could do their puppet shows like before. Life was hard in Blue Earth. It was very different from the life Marjorie had in the city with her mother and sister. But she adjusted well, and her friend Grace was there with her. At this time, World War I was being fought in Europe, but America was not involved. That soon changed, and in April of 1917, America entered the war. 2 million troops were needed. A law was soon passed that required all young men to register for the draft. All 3 of the Fox brothers reported on June 5th as required. Our grandfather, Chester, was 23. He was described as tall, with a medium build, blue eyes, and brown hair. Chester was married to Marjorie Barkley, and the couple was expecting their first child. Chester's older brother, Ray, was 26. He was also described as tall, with a medium build and blue eyes. On June 5th, Ray was single. 13 days later, Ray was married. His new wife was Mildred Briggs, a local girl from Blue Earth. They both wanted to start a family immediately. On the same day as Ray's wedding, Marjorie gave birth to her first child. They named him Robert, and he was Sax and Mary's first grandchild. 9 months later, in March of 1918, Ray and Mildred had their first child, a daughter they named Marion. When Ray got married, Walter moved into the big house with his parents and sisters. But he would not stay for long. Walter was a secretary for the National War Council of the YMCA. He was a librarian and would help provide books and newspapers to the soldiers fighting overseas. Walter had a disability that prevented him from serving in the military. He wanted to do his part in another way. In 1918, in April, Sax and Mary accompanied their son Walter to the Faribault County Courthouse. Walter was applying for a passport to visit France. Sax and Mary testified to Walter's native-born citizenship. His mother signed the affidavit. Walter left for Europe, and a few weeks later, Nellie left for Minneapolis. She got a teaching job at Willard Elementary School. Nellie had a small home just a few blocks away from the school. It was on Sheridan Avenue. The Fox family was changing fast. George, Nellie, and Walter were gone. Chester and Ray had started their own families. Grace was the only child at home. She was waiting to move to Minneapolis and live with her sister Nellie. The Fox family soon received bad news from back home in Radnor. Sax's older brother Walter died. He was 62. Walter's son Norvin stayed on the farm in Radnor. Norvin lived next to Florabelle and her mother Kate. Walter's wife, Nellie Dickinson, moved to Peoria with her oldest son Thomas and her youngest son George, 15 at the time. Ray and Walter will help their cousin George in the years to come. The following spring, in April of 1919, Chester and Marjorie had their second child. It was a daughter they named Elaine. In September, Walter came home from France. He arrived in New York and took the train to Blue Earth. Walter was worried, and it was not a pleasant trip. His mother Mary had written to him with her concerns. Sax had been too sick to help the boys with the spring planting. Now, here in the fall, the thrashing crew was here. For the first time in his life, Sax didn't help bring in the fall harvest. Walter knew this was serious, and he was right. Within a few weeks, on November 29, 1919, our great-grandfather, Saxelby Fox, passed away on the family farm in Blue Earth. He was only 60 years old. He was buried at Riverside Cemetery in Blue Earth, Minnesota. Sax was greatly missed by all of his family, but they were more concerned for their mother. She had been with Sax since they were small children. They shared their entire lives together. Mary had no memory of a time when Sax was not in her life. Now she was without him. But she had her entire family with her. Mary would see that her boys lived on a family farm, and she would keep her promise to Grace. Grace would go to the University of Minnesota. Mary and Grace moved to Minneapolis and lived with Big Sister Nellie. In 1919, Nellie was a teacher at Willard Elementary School. She lived in Minneapolis, but her little house was several miles from the university. She soon found a new house, big enough for all three girls, that was within walking distance of the university. The three Fox ladies lived here at 1214 5th Street Northeast. Mary and Grace moved there immediately. They took only their suitcases. Grace wanted to get her mother away from the farm before Christmas. With their father now gone, the Fox brothers all agreed that the farm in Blue Earth was too big for them to manage. They needed to find a smaller one that was closer to their mother in Minneapolis, and they needed to find it fast. Spring planting was 6 months away. They soon found a new farm that was perfectly suited for the entire Fox family. There were 2 large farmhouses and a herd of dairy cows. The new farm was about 80 miles away in a small town called Northfield. Northfield was less than 30 miles from their mother and sisters in Minneapolis. Walter signed the deed at the First National Bank. His niece's husband would one day be the bank manager. Chester and his family moved to Northfield immediately. Walter came with them. There was much work to do. In addition to planting the spring crops, they were unpacking all of the family goods being sent from Blue Earth by their brother Ray. And the new farm was in disrepair. The barn was unusable and had to be rebuilt immediately. They would need Brother Ray for that job. Ray and his wife Mildred were still in Blue Earth. They were staying in the local motel. They are the first family on page 1 of the U.S. Census report. Ray was shipping all of the farm equipment to Northfield and selling the family farm in Blue Earth. Within a few weeks, Ray's job was completed. He traveled this road to join his brothers in Northfield. He arrived in time for the spring planting, but did not help with the crops. Ray had to build a new barn and make many repairs around the property. The boys wanted their farm to be like the one Sachs had built for them in Gibson City. It was. Known locally as the Fox Brothers Farm, it was a favorite gathering place for the entire community. The family was proud of it. Sachs had taught his boys well. The following year, in January of 1921, Ray and Mildred had their second child, a son they named Stuart. He was named after Mary's mother, Ellen Stuart Trigger. A month later, Marjorie had her third child. It was a daughter they named Mary Zoe. Mary was the name of Chester's mother. Zoe was the name of Marjorie's mother. Mary was proud of her family and wanted to stay better in touch. Long-distance lines were being installed all over the country. Mary paid to have a phone installed out on the farm. Chester and Marjorie's phone number was 246J. A telephone in 1920 was an expensive luxury item. Chester's cousins, Norvin and Florabelle, did not get phones until after World War II. Mary could afford the new phone because Sachs had provided a steady retirement income for her. Like their parents before them, the Fox brothers were active in the local community. Walter was on the board of the County Farm Bureau. He used the new phone for his business as an auctioneer. Although they had a telephone, Mary liked to visit her boys and their families out on the farm. Nellie had a car. It was a 40-mile trip to Northfield. Nellie drove while Sister Grace sat up front and navigated using a road map. It was difficult because all of the roads were not paved. Mother sat in the back seat and tried to keep quiet. She thought Nellie drove too fast. Although Mother did not especially like the drive, the girls would visit their family in Northfield as often as they could. Grace was a student at the University of Minnesota, and Nellie was a teacher at Willard Elementary. Willard was one of the first grade schools in Minneapolis, and its history is well documented. The school was on the edge of town in a very rural area. When a blizzard came, the parents would pick up their kids in bobsleds. The teachers would stay until the last child had left, then hurry to catch the last streetcar. Nellie had to walk home often in some of the worst weather in the country. By the spring of 1921, Nellie had pneumonia. Her doctor wanted her to move away from Minneapolis to a drier, warmer climate. He suggested California. Mary was worried. She planned to tell the boys when she saw them next, at the picnic. For July 4th of that year, Northfield planned a citywide celebration. The Fox brothers played at a charity baseball game between the businessmen and the farmers. Later, there was a picnic, a dance at the armory, and a fireworks show. The Boy Scout troop directed traffic. The fire truck accidentally aimed their hoses in the wrong direction and sprayed the crowd, but everyone had a good time. The police chief reported there were no arrests for the entire day. The entire Fox family was there. Mary had come from Minneapolis with Nellie and Grace. They stayed for a few days out on the Fox brothers' farm. Mary told the boys about Nellie's pneumonia. She wanted Nellie to move to California like her doctor suggested. The boys agreed, but would not let Mother move out there alone. Ray and Walter were experienced carpenters and could easily find a good job there. Once established, they would send for Mother and the girls. Grace attended the university for the spring term of 1922. She was a junior and had less than a year until graduation. But Grace would not attend the fall term. Ray and Walter found jobs in California and had a house for Mother and the girls. The three Fox ladies moved to Los Angeles before winter set in. Chester and Marjorie said their goodbyes at the railroad station in Minneapolis. The trip took several days, and the women often talked about their uncertain future. They had no idea that their lives would soon become better than they could have imagined. But first, they would suffer an unexpected family tragedy.